Synthetic monitoring is valuable because it enables a webmaster to identify problems and determine if a website or your application is slow. Also, you can proactively monitor the complete end user journey. And finally, we'll be discussing on REST API, SOAP, and SSL certificate monitoring. Let's get started. Synthetic transactions to capture user interactions. So before we dive deep into this specific topic, let's take a sample web application architecture. As you can see in this image, multiple components like web server, web app, and SQL DBs. All these components were tightly integrated with each other to keep your applications up and running. On the other hand, we have the end user who accesses your website using a web client, that is a browser. In today's session, we will be predominantly focusing on how your end user interacts with your web application and measuring the performance to deliver smooth user experience. Let's dive deeper into the specific components which may cause inconsistent app experience for your end users. Say the network request could take long time, the page load details, and other metrics which could impact the performance of your web application. You can set up end user monitoring agents in multiple branch offices and check the performance in a global perspective. You can immediately test on error transaction, which help you to eliminate false positives. In Applications Manager, website monitoring is carried into 4 different types. So before we discuss the various ways, let's see why website monitoring is important. Website and blogs were becoming an integral part of our brand and business. To put some further perspective on the importance of your web assets, internet companies may penalize your search results ranking if your site or if it produces a poor experience for the end user. However, in many industries, 90% of the purchasing decisions starts with an online search. So now let's discuss the various ways through which you can perform website monitoring in Applications Manager. URL monitoring, URL sequence, and URL content monitoring, and finally we will be discussing on real browser monitor. So let's check these topics one by one. HTTP URL. So why HTTP URL is required? You can check the accessibility and the availability of your websites and receive notifications in case if they are down. Application Manager Website Monitor allows you to monitor various attributes such as DNS time, connection time, first byte time, and last byte time. The next topic is URL sequence monitor. So before we discuss into URL sequence, let's see how you can perform a URL sequence monitor. So to perform a URL sequence monitor, we need a specific tool called Web Transaction Recorder, through which we will be capturing the sequences of URL. We use single recorder for both URL sequence and real browser monitor. This is the upgraded version of Web Transaction Recorder. Let's see why URL sequence monitor is required. When a website which has multiple pages or subpages needs to be monitored, then you can capture the sequence of all URLs with the performance statistics, which would be quite useful for you to understand the behavior. So Applications Manager allows you to record all transactions in sequence for every URL that has been accessed from the main parent URL in the sequence of clicks, thus by allowing the users to track availability statistics of all URLs in the sequence of transactions. So why URL sequence monitor is required? If your site is not reachable due to multiple people accessing the same site, that could be one of the reasons why the URL is not accessible. And other reasons could be the landing page could be slow, or it could lead to HTTP 500 internal server error. Let's get some hands-on training. So I'm going to switch back to the UI and see how we can add URL sequence. I hope you can see the Applications Manager product UI. So to add a URL monitor, the option which I need to go through is New Monitor, choose Add New Monitor, and in the Web Server or Services category, let me choose HTTP URL. So after choosing the URL, I can provide a display name for my very own purpose. So the URL address is, let me specify a URL address here. This is the URL which I would like to monitor. and the polling interval and the timeout we can specify it. Exploring the other options, HTTP configurations, wherein you can provide the form submission method like post or get. In case if the form submission method is post, then you need to provide the payload type for this URL. And if the website requires a dynamic content, right, you can pass the dynamic values by specifying the $tag. And if the website requires form-based authentication, then you can specify the username and password. If you would like to generate an error based upon a particular response code, then you can specify the particular response code and the conditions for it. And if it requires user agent field, very well you can go ahead and specify that. And if the website requires custom HTTP headers, you can provide the header name, header value. If the website requires SSL version to be explicitly specified, you can go ahead and specify it. So the website which I am trying to monitor, it requires an client certificate authentication. So what I'll be doing is, let me choose this checkbox and choose file, and I need to upload the specified certificate for accessing this. So now I have provided the certificate here. Let me choose the provide the password here. So I have provided the password. Let's discuss the further options which could be quite useful. You can provide the keywords to perform a content check in the website. Should contain and should not contain based on the values which you are specifying. If the specified string is available in your website, then the alert will be raised. If you would like to associate this particular URL to any of your monitor groups, then you can choose this option and specify the particular monitor group which you would like to associate with. So then I can click add URL monitor. Now you can see that this URL monitor has been successfully configured. To view the performance metrics of this URL, let me click the monitor details page. You can see that the health of this particular URL is clear and the website is up and running right now. You can see the performance statistics of your website in this particular page, like the average response time, current response time, and the response time split up based upon multiple values like DNS time, connection time, first byte time, and last byte time. And most importantly, the page size of your website is again monitored. Current page size, the percentage in page size, the previous page size. The next step is, now we have monitored the performance metrics. To configure the alarms, on the top right hand side, we have a specific option called configure alarms. So let me choose this option. And as you can see here, the list of available attributes for the URL monitor is already displayed here. You can very well choose any of the attribute for which you would like to configure alarms and get it configured. If you are not sure about the threshold value which you would like to define, then you can check the historical report. So let me show you how this can be done. So this URL which I have added right now doesn't contain enough data, historical data. So let me choose any of the previous added monitors so that we can check the historical data. So now we can see the response time graph here. And to check the threshold values, let's check the historical data. And when you expand the specific tab, you have the minimum average and maximum average values. And based upon these values, you can add plus or minus 20 for the threshold values, which would be quite helpful for you. And in fact, you can again verify with your network administrators. So now let's go back to the next topic, that is HTTP URL sequence. So as I have mentioned earlier, to add a URL sequence monitor, we need a web transaction recorder. So let me access the web transaction recorder and show you how you can capture the sequences of the URL using this specific tool. So here you have two fields. Here you need to provide your host name of the instance where applications manager is actually running. So I'm going to provide the SSL port number. If you are not sure about the SSL port number, then you can go to the applications manager installation directory. You will be finding a specific folder called conf, under which you will be finding a file called amserver.properties, where you can find your HTTP and HTTPS ports. And then you can click connect. the username and the password of your applications manager instance. So I'm going to provide it as admin. So now after login, you see that two options being displayed here. So we are going to perform create URL sequence monitor, which is available on the bottom left hand side. So let me choose this option. And now we need to enter the specific URL for which we would like to capture the sequences. So let me enter a sample URL here. So this is the URL which I'm entering. So now we can see that the page has been successfully loaded. The next step which I need to perform is click preview and save. When you click preview and save, you need to provide the sequence name in this particular page. So I'm providing it as ME RVM and the polling interval again. I would like to add this particular URL sequence monitor as a URL sequence monitor. I don't want this to be added as a real browser monitor for this specific transaction which I have performed. So I'm going to uncheck this specific option. Let me click next. Now you can see that the main URL along with the sub URLs has been already captured and displayed here. So now I don't want all URLs to be monitored. There are few unwanted contents which I can ignore. So how would I do that? By using the filter option. So here you can provide the specific extension to be filtered. So I don't want the web fonts to be captured. So let me enter it as web fonts here and click add. So now you can see that the web fonts URL has been already filtered and removed from this particular page. To filter further more URLs, you can again use this specific option to filter those. And once this is done, you can use the create URL sequence monitor option and can get these filtered. Let me filter further more URLs for demonstration purpose. So once it is added, you can go back to the UI and check the performance metrics. So let me switch back to the UI and show you the performance metrics. For that, let me click monitors page here. And in the web server or services category, let me choose URL sequence. And here you find a specific option that manages the URL, which is one of the URL which I have already added. And here you can see the URL sequences which we have performed, and you can find the total response time of all the URLs along with the various response time split up. Hope this information helps. So let me switch back to the presentation and continue from where we have actually left. So we have discussed why URL sequence monitoring is required and seen the various ways through which you can add the URL sequence monitor. The next topic for today is monitoring the complete end user journey through your site. So let's see how this can be performed. So to monitor the complete end user journey, the end user usually interacts with the domain URL, which is the business front page. It is how your customers actually access your product offerings. It constructs the functional page the users first see. On that particular page, there are set of links followed by other links set as a path to lead the customers to various offerings. The job of the first page and the subsequent page is to lead users to complete a specific business transaction. And we will be discussing more on the user interaction with your web application using the applications manager end user monitoring solution. So as you can see here, this is one of the end user monitoring, and let me explain you how end user monitoring works. As you can see in this image, applications manager is installed in a machine which is located in a particular data center. However, I have my customers located globally. I wanted my websites to check the performance from a different global perspective. So what I'll be doing is I'll deploy a end user monitoring agent in multiple branch offices. As you can see in this image, branch office 1 and branch office 2. This end user monitoring agent will collect the data and will share to the applications manager, so that in a single console, you have a centralized view of your web application's performance in a different geographical perspective. Again, this provides you an ability to monitor the health and the performance of your services from multiple locations outside your corporate firewall. This capability provides greater visibility into your user experience and detect the potential performance before your end users were actually impacted. So now let's see how end user monitoring agents can be installed, and we will see the real-time procedure of it. End user monitoring agents, as I mentioned earlier, can be installed in multiple branch offices in different cities of your end users or in your client locations. All you need is a secure HTTP connection between the agent and the applications manager server. The service will then be executed from the remote location, that is the end user monitoring agent location, and will then be passed on to the applications manager. Let's get into the UI and see how we can configure the end user monitoring agent. Please feel free to ask your questions in the webinar chat panel. Our expert panelist is available for you to answer those questions. So to download the end user monitoring agent, let me choose EUM page here, and here you have a link to download the EUM agent. So this link will be shared to you in the webinar chat panel. So I'm gonna skip the installation procedure, which is pretty simple, straightforward, and you can follow the on-screen instructions to install the end user monitoring agent. So once the end user monitoring agent is installed, you can verify the service of the end user monitoring agent by choosing the services. In case if it is a Windows-based installation, if it is installed as service, you can choose services and find whether the applications manager end user monitoring agent service is up and running. So let me choose this, and as I can see here that the end user monitoring agent service is up and running. So the next step which I can ensure that the agent is running is by accessing the specific port. So by default, the end user monitoring agent will be installed in 9999. So as you can see that the end user monitoring agent configuration page is available now. So here you can specify the host name of your applications manager instance. I have already provided my host name and the server port, admin, and the password. And now you can provide the proxy settings. In case if the website requires proxy authentication, then you can very well go ahead and specify those information here on this page. And make sure that from the applications manager end user monitoring agent, the host and port is accessible, so that will help you to understand. So let me switch back to the UI and show you how the end user monitoring agent, which is deployed in different geographical location, looks like. As you can see here, I have deployed an agent in a machine based out of New York, London, and Dubai. So I can actually differentiate and find how my web application is performing in a real-time perspective. To add further more details, let me switch back to the presentation and see how we can capture the URL sequences and then how the sequences can be played back in these installed EUM agents. So before we discuss on capturing the user sequences, let's discuss why real browser monitoring is required. In order to guarantee a seamless user experience, it is important to understand the user interaction with the website and how the website responds to various requests. So real browser monitoring facilitates the end user experience monitoring, which gives you a glimpse of the performance of your website in a global perspective. You can in fact perform a simulation of your real user complex workflows, can perform form data submission, user action emulation. So they reduce the blame game between application development and network operations team. So what do I mean by this is, when your website is not available, we usually check with the product developers to find if there is any issue with the web server or SQL DBs. However, what if there is a network latency and because of which your application is not accessible? So we will be predominantly focusing on capturing the end user experience using the real browser monitoring synthetic recorder. Let's see how we can record a web script. We'll be performing this in a real-time basis. So let me just give you a glimpse of it. So we'll be launching the recorder, provide the host and port of your applications manager, and enter the credentials. So after entering these details, the next step to get started with monitoring the critical workflows. So we have to perform a simulation of your end user activity, and this web transaction recorder will capture those sequences and will record into a form of script. And the script will be played back in the end user monitoring agents, which is deployed in New York, London, and Dubai, so that you capture the sequences of your website from a different global perspective. You can in fact monitor the multi-step user interactions. So synthetic monitoring allows you to record and replay a set of simulated transactions that your user is likely to have while accessing your web application. So replaying the same transaction on UM agent during every poll helps analyze your transactions are occurring seamlessly in every locations. If there are any bottlenecks hindering your website performance, then you can easily identify that. So let me switch back to the UI and show you how we can configure real browser monitoring. So to capture a real browser monitoring, again, we'll be using the same tool, Web Transaction Recorder, which is a combined tool. Let me start it from the beginning. So I'll be providing the host name, and let me provide the SSL port number and choose connect. Username and password of your applications manager instance. Now on the right hand side, we have a specific option called create real browser monitor. So let me choose this option, and here I'll be entering the sequence of the URL, and I'll be performing the user action emulation. So I always wanted my customers to access the customer support page seamlessly. Whenever they want to reach out to customer service, the website should load properly and it should give sufficient information for the end users. So now I have loaded this site. The next step which I'll be performing is I always wanted the users to check the FAQ page seamlessly. So I'm just clicking this transaction, and now let me click preview and save. So when I click the preview and save, I need to provide a monitor name for the identification. So here, let me use it as RBM. And as you can see in this particular page, there are multiple options like page load timeout, select agent. So let's discuss this one by one. So if the website requires a long page timeout, then you can provide a timeout value of 30 seconds, which is the maximum value. And we provide an options to perform a playback in the different end user monitoring agents. Now you can see that the agents which I have already deployed is captured by this recorder, and it is already showing here. So let me choose any of these locations and check the playback in that specified locations, and uncheck the URL sequence monitor because I'm going to add it as real browser monitor. So let me click next, and now you can see that the sequences which I have performed is already displayed. So the sequences, including the mouse level interactions performed by the user and the keyboard text which the user has performed, will be automatically captured, will be played back in the end user monitoring agent, which is based out of New York and Dubai. So if you would like to generate an alert based upon a specific keywords, then you can specify those keywords in the specified format. And if you would like to perform a test playback, you can very well go ahead and perform a test playback, which will help you to test this particular script. So let me choose create real browser monitor. As you can see that the monitor has been added successfully. So let me click OK and go back to the UI and check the data. So I'm in the UI. Let's check this data here. This is the particular monitor which I have added now, RBMC, and the agents which I have chosen, it's already displayed here. So since this is the first time, the playback will take a little bit of time. So while the playback is happening, let's go back to a different monitor and check how the real-time data looks like. So let me choose EUM journey, which is one of the different monitor which I have added earlier. So you can see that in this particular page, the end user monitoring journey is calculated from different locations, New York, Dubai, and London. And you can find that the response time and the transaction time from different geographical locations, which will help you to understand how your application is performing in various locations. In case, if you would like to check an individual geographical location data. So then you can go inside this particular monitor and check the average page load time, the transaction time. The transaction is nothing but which is the combined steps of all the steps which is displayed here. And you can find the page load time for the each and individual steps and the loading time, page load time for each and individual steps along with the screenshots. So now let me switch back to the UI presentation. So we will see measuring the web application performance across the globe. So Real Browser Monitor dashboard provides you a comprehensive view of the status of your website as I have shown. So we can perform the response time from different branch offices or customer locations. You can actually reduce the page load time by optimizing your backend components. You can visualize your resource size and resource count split up of all elements such as HTML, CSS, script, and identify which particular components are contributing to the poor performance of your website. So let's go back to the UI and check the data. So before we go back to the UI, I would like to show you this particular waterfall model approach as well, which will help you to understand the website performance in a more detailed perspective. So metrics such as connection time, network latency, and the download time. In fact, every element of your web page is tracked to allow your IT teams to understand the overall perspective of your web applications. You can detect the problematic areas instantly without impacting the production service. Let's go to the UI and check this in real-time data. So I was talking about optimizing the backend components. So what do I mean by optimizing the backend components is what, let me show that to you. So in this particular specific page, you can see that the script consumes 100%. If the website component is split up of multiple other CSS elements or image, then those will be actually shown here. And based upon that, you can optimize your web page. And most importantly, the waterfall diagram for the specific URL is shown. So by understanding this, you can find the download time, and that seems to be network latency and secure connection time and the connection time information for your IT teams, which will help you to understand the user traffic in the specific location from where the playback is happening. So now let me go back to the presentation and let's discuss why the end user monitoring feature is required. So with Applications Manager real-time website monitoring, you will be able to understand how your users navigate through your website. So you can measure and monitor the critical performance metrics and maintain your SLAs. User experience acts as a product differentiator, perhaps even more so than price. So this means more data from various data sources is needed to support applications monitoring, which requires scalable solutions like end user monitoring. You can measure multiple workflows for different domains like banking, healthcare, e-commerce. So playback scripts can be captured and performed in the end user monitoring agents. You can reduce the number of reported incidents from your end users by performing an real browser monitoring, thus by providing them a seamless digital end user experience. So let's get started for the next topic of today, which is website defacement, that is website content monitoring. So one of the most important aspect of website monitoring for any business organization is monitoring the content hosted on the website. So defacement is one of the subtle forms of hacking where the content of the website is modified by just inserting an malicious code to deface your website. We will be predominantly focusing on protecting your website using the website content monitoring feature available in Applications Manager. So, website defacement detection. So, who performs this website defacement? It is typically done by hackers who break into your web server and replace the content or script in the hosted website using their very own way of techniques. So, using Applications Manager website defacement detection, you can negate those kind of activities by performing a proactive monitoring. So now see what type of content we monitor. So we monitor or we scan your entire web page for the hacked links and other quality issues. We perform a text monitoring, and if there is any defaced text, those will be shown as you can see in the screenshot along with the original content with the modified content, which will help you to analyze what particular text changes has been made. Not only text changes, script, iframe, anchor, there are 6 elements, HTML elements, which we support. We will be discussing that in the product UI in detail. So let's see how you can add a website content monitor. So when you add your website for content monitoring, we check the integrity of your website by detecting modification of components and other critical elements. When you set up the monitor, it starts polling your web page and will record any detected web tamperings. So you can actually see the list of web pages that are being monitored, which will help you to analyze the security breaches on your website, including unauthorized addition or modification of HTML elements. So let me switch back to the UI and see how we can add a website content monitor. So I'm in the product UI. To add a website content monitor, I'll be choosing new monitor, add new monitor, and here choose website content. And here I need to provide a display name so that you can actually use it for your identification purpose. Let me provide it as WCM and the domain URL for which you would like to perform a website content. So let me provide one of the URL here. And click get web pages. This will fetch the sub web pages available in the parent web page so that you can choose the subcategories as well. So let me choose a couple of child web pages. And here we provide you an option to auto override the defaced content, which will help you to override the defaced content in the applications manager database. So at the time of adding the monitor, whatever data is available in your website is considered as original content, and post that whatever changes were happening in the website is considered as defaced content. So in case if you would like to auto override the content in the applications manager database, you can choose this option and provide the username and password if the website requires, and then you can click add monitor. As you can see that this monitor has been added successfully. Let me switch back to the UI and show you how the data looks like. I have added a couple of website content monitors earlier to show you how real-time data looks like. So let me take you to those. This is for illustration purpose. So you can see that in this particular site, the health is affected. So why the health is affected? As you can see that the defaced text percent seems to be 15. So to find detailed information on this, let me click that specified URL and I can see the page size details, defacement percentage details, and you can see that the defaced text percent is 15. To find the exact content which is defaced, let me click the other elements defaced and you can find the defaced anchor details. You can see the original content details on the left hand side. On the right hand side, you can see the modified content details. So this will help you to analyze the website defacement, if any. So I have mentioned you that I'll be explaining the 6 different types of defacement which we perform. The first type is text defacement, which is we identify the content changes if there is any and we display it to you. And then script defacement, image defacement, anchor, iframe, and link defacement. These were the different HTML elements which we perform a content check. So let me go back to the presentation and we'll discuss the other topics. The other topic for today is REST API SOAP SSL certificate. So before we discuss into these topics, let's see why REST API monitoring is important. Applications Manager enables you to proactively monitor your REST APIs for performance and functional correctness. So let me give you a real-time example where REST APIs are used. Popular cab operator companies use REST APIs in the click-to-call feature. If the particular API contains long response time or if the API is down, then they call when the passenger performs call driver option, then the call cannot be connected with the driver, which impacts the business. So these kind of business critical APIs, which is embedded in your mobile application, needs to be monitored. So let's see how we can perform a REST API monitoring. You can see that adding a REST API monitor. We will be discussing this in the product UI and will show you hands-on demo. And perform a REST API data validation. So response transformation is performed to process the response and to show the attributes. And in fact, you can validate the data from your REST API endpoints. Make sure that the responses meet your actual expectations. Verify whether the data is returning the expected details. Let me switch back to the UI and we'll show you how this could be done. So to add a REST API monitor, again, I'll be following this workflow. Add new monitor, and in the web server services category, here I have this option called REST API monitor. So let me choose this option and provide a display name here and the REST API URL which I would like to add, and the timeout in seconds details and the form submission method. There are multiple form submission methods where you can specify it: get, post, put, delete. These were the common operations which are being used. If you are using it as post, make sure that you provide these details along with the payload type details. And you can specify the HTTP headers field. Most importantly, what type of response is required. We support 3 types of responses: text, XML, and JSON. So you can choose it based upon your requirements. And if you would like to add it as an JSON, you can choose it as JSON. And again, if you would like to perform a content check for the response which is retrieved from the API, you can choose this specific option, specify the keyword should contain, should not contain, and the regular expression details. It's again a handy option. So after entering these details, we can click add monitor. So let me show you one monitor which I have already added to show you how this actually looks like in real time. So for that, let me choose one of the JSON response API which I have already added. And you can see the response time details of the specific API, the domain name resolution time, connection time, request processing time, and the download time, along with the response content details. So you can see the page size in change details. So most importantly, in the presentation, we were talking about the REST API data validation. So let me show you how this can be performed. In the response details tab, you have this particular response which is retrieved by the API. So let me give you another example here. This is the specific API which I am calling. So whenever I call this API, this is the response which I receive. So to filter the attributes, so I can see that there are multiple attributes which were displayed. So to monitor a specific attributes out of these response, so then you can copy this particular response. This is just an example. You can use any online JSON editor and simply paste that response here, and you can expand the specific tab and check the result, and you can find the attributes which is already displayed here. So based upon these attributes, you need to note the array value here, and based upon the array value, add the JSON schema here, and this should be in this format, like attribute name and the attribute value. So the attribute name is nothing but average, so I have provided it as average, and the result which I'm taking from the response. So as you can see those details here, and you can update your JSON schema. So once this is done, you can configure alarms for each and every individual attributes which is retrieved as a response from the API. So this is again customizable as per your very own business requirements. So to configure alarm, let me click configure alarm here and define a threshold value, and if the defined value is violated, you get it notified, which seems to be another handy option for you. So let me switch back to the UI product presentation and discuss how the other web services monitoring can be performed. So the next topic for today is web service SOAP monitoring. You can track the operational statistics of your web service Service-oriented architectures actually helps you in building web services to build a complex business process as well. So application manager provides a flexible approach to manage an SOA that use SOAP web service. It monitors the availability and performance of the APIs, giving the business managers a visibility to ensure that the line of business applications actually meet the defined SLAs. So let me show you how you can add a web service or SOAP monitoring. So let me switch back to the UI, and you can see that add new monitor option is the one which I'm choosing, and web service SOAP. You can see that the web services and provide a display name. WSDL URL is the most important aspect of adding your web service. So if you face any issue while adding this specific monitor, make sure that from the applications manager installed server, this WSDL URL is accessible so that this monitor can be successfully added and you can perform the web service operations. Let me switch back to the next topic, which is SSL certificate, and for that, let me switch back to the presentation. So this is the final topic for today, that is SSL certificate monitoring. So why the SSL certificate monitoring is important? SSL certificates are extensively used in any e-commerce companies. So these certificates encrypt the data flowing from the website of the certificate holder. All SSL certificates definitely contain an expiry date, while most web applications check before using the contents of the certificate. So Manage Engine Applications Manager provides you an ability to monitor the expiry date of your SSL certificates. So if a user is accessing your website and see a prompt saying that the content is not secure, then the credibility is again lost. So it is important to monitor these expiration of the SSL certificates. So let me switch back to the UI and show you how SSL certificates can be added using Applications Manager. New monitor, add new monitor. In the web server services category, SSL certificate monitor is the option to go with. Again, you can provide a display name and the domain name for which you are trying to monitor the certificate. Again, you can provide your IP address here as well and the port number. If it requires an SSL version, you can specify that. And for accessing this domain, if you need a proxy server, then you can check this specific option, and the timeout details, you can specify it. After entering these details, you can click add monitor, and you can go back to the monitors page and choose SSL certificate monitor here and click the certificate expiration, and you can find that it has been issued to so-and-so.com and issued by the certificate authority details. Most importantly, you can find the validity of your SSL certificate issued on so-and-so date and expires, and most importantly, find the days to expire. You can click configure alarms and define a value for days to expire attribute and get it notified before the actual expiration. So let me switch back to the presentation. So let's have a quick recap of what we have discussed today. So we have started our sessions with capturing the synthetic test to analyze the user interactions with your applications. We have simulated your business critical customer journeys by performing those activity in the web transaction recorder. We have captured those activity from multiple geographical location using the end user monitoring agent. And finally, we have discussed about REST API, SOAP, and SSL certificate monitoring.